All right. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what we call as a weather application. So weather application is a simple application that basically retrieve a weather data from a server. Okay. So what we need now is to build the user interface, or to have the user interface to display the data that later we're going to retrieve from this weather server. So the server basically provide what we call as an API, application programming interface, that allow developer to retrieve the data. So the API, or the application programming interface, is just a script, and usually built using server-side script. For example, PHP, right? So usually you can use PHP to build an API. You can use Node.js. You can use also Python, Flask. You can use, there are quite a number of back-end services available that you can use to build the API. But here we're not going to build the API. We're going to use the API that already provided by this website. It's free for certain features from the server is free. But if you want to use advanced feature or any real-time features, that you might need to pay for the service, because API is a business on its own. Okay, you need to pay for their service because they built their service for people or for developer to use, and then to build other application that use their data or use their database. All right, so here what we have, just a very simple user interface. So you create new project here. So there's nothing special here. You can have your home page, and your home page is stateful widget call from the stateless widget. And the home page here basically described in this application is down here. Right, so the home page consists of the following user interface. All right, so you have your text up here, and down here, this is a drop-down menu, drop-down button, so which allow user to select their location. This button down here, load weather, and the output is going to be down here. So this is where we display the output that we retrieve from the API. Okay. All right. So that's basically the logic. That's basically the user interface design. So to build that, so you can see here the body being held by center widget, and the center widget child is a column widget. And then you have your elements or your widgets list here, the title, and then down here there's a drop down widget. So this is basically quite maybe new for you for the drop down widget. So the drop down widget is going to be a little bit long in terms of the implementation, because there's a number of parameter that you need to satisfy. For the drop-down widget, you can see that's from here until here. So these all belong to the drop-down widget. Okay. So the drop-down widget basically allow for the application to list predetermined value. Okay, list a predetermined value which allow for user to, or for the button to display. So as you can see, let me just show you quickly here. So you can set an item height for the drop down items inside the drop, like 60 pixels or whatever that you want to design. It's up to you. The default value, all right. So this is the default value. So the default value is a string type, so which define the initial value for the drop down. The initial value must be part of the list. Okay, here I use select location. You can see my select location equal to Ipoh, so which is also part of this list down here. So this is an list array. So that is the default value provided to the drop down button. There's a method on change method. Okay, so on change means that if you click on that drop down button, you change the value of the drop down button and it will basically handle by this. So the on-change method basically will receive the new selected value that we have from the new value. And then we implement a set state with the updated. Okay, we're going to update the select location with the new value that we receive from the selected value. And then down here, this is where we list the item. Okay, we list or we populate the item in the drop down menu or drop down button. So where do we get the list? The list actually comes from the log list array. Okay, so the log list array basically will get the value by using map, and then based on the select location, the default location, the default value, we'll return this UI. Okay, we'll return this drop-down menu item. We look on that, how many items that we have, and then we'll show, we'll check the value based on the select location that we define, and then we'll define to list. Okay, so this is where we populate the item to list, and the item comes from here. You can see the list array object here, location list. Okay, so this is a object string. So the object string here like Changlun, Jitra, Alustar, Ipoh, or you can add whatever location that you want. Let's say, I'm not quite sure if Medan in Indonesia, like Medan, right? So let's say I'm not quite sure it's available or not from the server. But yeah, that's just for the listing there. So that's for the menu drop down button. And then after that, we have an elevated button. That's just a button that we have that we want to press the button and retrieve the information. And down here, this is where we want to display back the result. So we have this string. And for now, the initial value for the string is no data. So if you run on this, okay, so you run this, you should be able to get the user interface that I have defined here. Okay, so the basic design. So let the application run first and see the interface, the user interface that we built, a very simple one. All right, so now you got your application running. So this is basically the user interface that you want. As you can see, output, this is the location that you want to select. Now you can see there's a Medan there. Okay, Jitra, you want to select on that. Changlun, okay, you can select that properly. All right. So now we have a button there. We can press the button, and this button basically will call this method down here. And at the moment, it contains nothing. Okay, there's no information yet. There's no operation. There's no logic that we have here. All right. So you can print, let's say, select location. You can just print out the value that being selected. All right. So like for example, press Changlun. Press the load whether you can see Changlun. Okay, so if you select Jitra, press whether you can see Jitra. Select on Alustar, you press that, you can see on the printout debug console Alustar. Okay, so that's basically just to confirm that our method is working. All right. All right, so once you have that, now we want to work on the logic and how can we call um, the data from the API, the weather data. All right, so let me just move from there. Okay, so to use the API here, for example, we have weather API. Uh, weather API, you need to obtain the API from the provider. There are a number of API provider available for weather, and one of it is from openweather.org. Okay, so this is basically one of the provider that you can use for free, which you don't have to pay for certain extent. Okay, so you can go to the openweathermap.org and then you can just register and log in. This is free. However, they do business Okay, so which means that they have pricing there. Okay, you can see the pricing there. So it's free for, it's quite generous actually, 1 million API call per month and 60 call per minute. Okay, they only limit to 60 call per minute. So which is if you develop application for like weather forecasting application, so you are basically good for only 60 API call per minute, which is 60, which is quite small in terms of numbers, even though you are allowed to have 1 million call per month. But it is quite likely that you are able to do that because they only have 60 call per minute that you can do that. Okay. So if you want to have better service, you need to pay 30 pound. For bigger developer, 140 pound, which allow you to get 3,000 call per minute. So any enterprise level, 200 call, which is you have to pay this amount. Okay, but for free, should be no problem. All right, so register with Open Weather Map or any other map services that provide API call. Okay, so you need to look for that. The free version, they have the free version, but they also have the paid version. So you just want to test out their API, go for the free version. But if you're getting serious into the application, then you can go ahead and develop the full version. Okay. So once you register, you can just access to this API key. So in my case, I have already registered, so it should be no problem for me to access my API key. So usually when you register for an API provider, you will be given with a key. It is called what we call as an API key. So this is basically your unique ID. Don't share with others. Even though I already shared with you, but I can just delete this and create new one. But this key unique to your own call, okay, your application call. So whenever you want to call for the API key, and the way that they know you are the one who making the call or valid call to the API through this key, okay? So that's how they counted. Without the key, you cannot access their service. Okay, so you need the key here. So the key basically allow you to access their service. All right. Once you have their key, you might need to look into their service, and what are the things that allowed for you. So this is basically the one that allowed for me. Hourly forecast unavailable, daily forecast unavailable, call per minute on 60, 3 hour forecast, 5 days, which is not that very latest. Okay, but it is free. You can view this. Okay. But if you want to pay for it, okay. Um, other than that, profile billing API key. Where is it? The billing plan, my order, my profile. Where's the URL link? They do have that before. Go to purchase. We don't know dashboard API. We do have the API key, but we want to get the URL for calling the API. It's a billing plan. It's a free one. No problem with that. What is the documentation? They should have more documentation here. Support how to start. Profile my order. History box. Um, forgot where to put it. Is it FAQ? Okay, done that. I can use my API call. Okay, here. All right, this is the URL that you need to work with. Okay, the URL, and then you need to provide your API key. And there's a parameter that actually there's a parameter, other parameter that you can use, but you need to look throughout this documentation that they have. But they're supposed to have a one location for you to access the API call, but I'm not quite sure where they put it. But mine already built that. So as you can see, this is supposed to be here. All right. So this is the API key, get URL. All right. This is the one that I built already. All right. So for example, this is mine. I already put it here. So as you can see, the way that we call our API is like this. So this is the link, and this is the parameter that we need to pass. This is all the parameter that we need to pass. The parameter here, pass weather, pass location GTRA, the location name, because I'm using the location name Q. And pass app ID because this is get array. Okay, you use the data separation by using n. App ID equal, this is my API key. Okay, and then the metric that I wanted for the API to retrieve is in metric because we live in Asia, and we use metric, and then we can get metric. All right. So if I click on this link, or if I open this link, maybe I can just click on this link straight away. So you can see that this is basically the data that they return. Okay, this is the data that we return from my request. But if I mistakenly put my, let's say like my app ID here, okay, this is wrong app ID, incorrect app ID. No, it will return invalid API key because I've used incorrect API key and return 401 not found. Okay, but if you enter correct information, you should be able to retrieve the information, the data. However, the data here is being written as what we call as a JSON data format, which is the de facto nowadays as a standard data that's being written by API. Most of the API will return this. You can have like CSV data written as CSV because you can process CSV. There's a parser for CSV. XML also you can get as an XML, but XML is not quite popular nowadays. And nowadays, all API written as JSON. And because JSON is much simpler data structure, flat data structure, and used by many technologies already. Okay, even the serverless or even the database, non-relational database also use JSON data structure. All right, so this is basically how the data is being written, but as you can see, it's quite difficult for you to read as, even though you can still see the coordinate, the latitude, longitude, the weather information, you can see cloudy, overcast cloud, and feels like the temperature, 26.7 degrees Celsius, pressure, humidity. So there's a lot of data that you can have from this. But how to make it sensible, how to make it readable for those who are not familiar with JSON data, you can use JSON data. You can use JSON data viewer, okay, or JSON data editor, right? You can just paste to the left here, and then, but there's also another way. I think there's a much better JSON editor. The one that I use most of the time is this one. Okay, all right, this one. Okay, so sure, I already have this. Continue to the site. All right. Okay, so now you just paste to the left. This is basically your JSON data, and then you can just put it to the right. Okay, and you can transform back everything to the left back. Okay, so you get that. Like for example, you one more time, paste to the right, so you get the structure, or you want to have like a table structure, or you can have tree structure. It is a much easier way to read the data. Okay, so you can push it back to the left, which is how the data should be able to read. But here you can see the data is being laid in a structure, into tree-like structure, or in a text structure is something like this. Okay, so text-like structure, you have your curly bracket, and then you have your key value, your object, your array. So it is being structured. Okay, structured into a much easier or readable value or readable content. Okay, now you can see that this is data for coordinate. So where's the location of the data? This is the data for weather station, weather information. Okay, you can see there's an object for weather and the data for weather information. Base station data for main data. This is where you get the main data, temperature, minimum, maximum, pressure, humidity, and everything. Visibility, perfect, wind speed and everything, cloud, country, sunrise time, sunset time, time zone, the name of the location and everything. All right, so those are basically the data that being returned from the open weather map, right? So how do we use the data? Or first, how do we retrieve the data from application here? So we want to retrieve the data when user press this button. When user press this button here, okay, so this button here, we want to retrieve the data from the API, from the link URL. All right, so how do we do that? The first thing that you need, basically, a library. So this library called HTTP library. All right, so HTTP library, let me just put it down here. I'm sure I'll talk about it here. All right, this is the library that you need. Okay, this is one of the library. There's quite a number of library that you can use to access HTTP requests, because you are doing HTTP requests here. There's a URL. This is a get array. A get array is HTTP request, hypertext transfer protocol request, which allow you to call that URL. Right. So the library basically available from here, HTTP, but I'm not quite sure the version is still quite low, 0.13.5. And the developer is not that quite active nowadays. Like 8 months ago, the last update, there's not much update to the version. I hope this one's still there, because you can say 100% popularity in terms of the usage. It's quite popular library, but there's also another library that you can use for HTTP. For example, if you're not using HTTP, but the one that I use most of the time is HTTP. You can use HTTP parser, you can use Dio, okay, you can use HTTP client. There's quite a number of library available, which allow you, but Dio is also a second most popular, but you're not quite sure in terms of that. But as you can see here, HTTP is very popular. HTTP parser also quite popular, but HTTP is very popular. Okay, this one, you can see that HTTP is quite, popularity is 100%. Compared to HTTP parser also allow you to run on all these, but I'm not quite sure in terms of the support there. But here is very popular, very easy to use, very straightforward, and yeah, it's very easy. So you need to do installation, install this parser, install this library by invoking this .pub at HTTP, and wait for it to have in your pub spec YAML. So now the current version for this is this 0.13.5, which is the latest version, and it will always under these dependencies, right? So make sure you don't have any error to your output. No, I'm not quite sure nowadays why they didn't do that automatically, but yeah, it's been a problem. All right, so now we want to access that library. So how do we access the library? If you look at the competition here, definitely, oh, this one, so using for audio player, and you want this. Okay, so install that and then add dependency into your project. You can use this, or the one that I use, just create an object out of it straight away. Okay, so up here, you can see package http dot dot, but create an object for the http, which is much easier to use. Okay, much easier to use. So this is as http, and you get http object directly from here. Okay, so once you have that, and you don't have any error here, you don't have any problem with your http object, and then you can use it already. So how do you use it? So I'm going to remove my print. So we're going to do it inside here. Okay, so moving on. So there are two parts here. The first part here is basically to build the call. Okay, to build the call. So to build the call, basically what I have here is this. Okay, so my API key, this is just okay. Before that, var. Okay, this is var is basically undefined variable. Okay, this is the easiest way if you get lazy sometimes, but this is also applied to me. Uh, var basically undefined variable, so it defined based on the assignment. So when you assign value, uh, this is very popular in Python. Python automatically do this. Okay, when you don't have the value, you don't define the value, you don't define your variable, and then when you assign the variable with a value, that variable will automatically becomes that data type. Okay, so it's go the same way with Flutter. So there's a var variable, and then when you have a variable name there, when you assign the value to whatever value that you have here, and in my case, I want to have a value of my API, which is my API here is this. It's better for me to take my API from my weather map. Where's my weather map here? So this is my API here. Those are my API value. So I'm going just to put it straight away to my API there. Yeah, I can just straight away define it as string. It should be no problem. It's string because it's just a string. Um, the second one that I built here, this is basically part of the requirement of HTTP is to build the URI or it's better URL. Class is it URL or URI? What is the data type for this? The data, oh, URI, sorry, URI data type. Okay, so this is a URI data type. So URI data type, basically we just want to convert the string here into URL object. Okay, this is an object called URI. So URL object, and then we build the URL object, and then we concatenate with our API. You can see there's an API there, $API ID, which is up here. And this is basically the select location. If we select Jitra, Changlun, or whatever location that we selected, so this is basically the value that we concatenate with our string HTTPS API call here. So basically, we're building this URL object. Okay. So once we build the URL object or the URI object, next we need to build the HTTP request. All right, so to build the HTTP request, as you can see from here, it's quite simple. This is the request. Okay, this is the request. So the request basically do this. Okay, so you have var response and there's an await parameter there. HTTP dot get, because we have the object up there, we define already dot get, because this is a get array. Okay, and then this is the URL that we have here. However, this response here is a type response. So if you want to straight away use a response, should be no problem. But definitely you need to make sure that the data type is correct. Okay. But there's a special what we call it what we call it await. Okay. So please understand that when we do any HTTP call, this is what we call asynchronous operation. Okay, asynchronous operation means that the operation will run asynchronously because we are dealing with a web server. Okay, we are dealing with HTTP requests and we have no idea when the request will be entertained or received by your application. So if anything that deals with that nature, you need to make sure that your application implement what we call as asynchronous operation. So we need to put an await, so which means that it will wait for the response to be returned by the call. All right. So when we put await here, we need to make sure that we need to add what we call as asynchronous modifier to our method, which is our method is not available yet. So you can just add asynchronous and then you should be able to solve that issue. Okay, await HTTP response. So everything will be dumped into this response, but I'm not quite sure. The object name here is response, it's supposed to be response, but it didn't allow me. All right. Because I already built HTTP object, but not quite sure, might need to add that, but usually we can just cut out, we can just use a var and then get away with it. Okay, so now this is a response object. So response object basically will receive the response, will receive sorry, this data here. will receive this data. This is the response. Okay, the body of the data. Okay, will return this to respond, part of it. Okay, not all, part of it. Return all the body data, but there's also another data that has been returned by the response, such as the response code, 200, 404, 401, 500. So those are the HTTP code that you need to understand when you receive a response. But this data is in body, so you should be able to receive the data and be able to print out the value. All right. So when you receive the response, so you need to act or you need to work on the response. So the first thing that you want to check is the response code. Okay, the response code, basically, we can just use straight away if response, okay, this is our response object here, dot. You can see there's a parameter that you can use. This is basically that being returned back from the request. Okay, you can see there's a status code, request, header, content length, body bytes. You can check all the data there. You can check all the response. So the one that we want first is the status code. Okay, if response.status code equal to 100, okay, 200 means that success. Okay, it's something like when you receive or when you open a website and suddenly you return 500 or suddenly you return 404 or suddenly you return. So that basically what we call as a response code. The server respond, but the respond with error code. But if it responds 200, means that it's working, it's okay. It will return the data, able to retrieve the data. So when you receive the response code equal to 100, means that you have the data. You can use the data. So I just want to check what is basically being written here. So I'm going to print out response dot body. All right. So now we can just check the body, and the body should be printed inside this debug console. Okay. So else we can just put print no data. It is something like if something other than 200. I'm going to save on that. So let me try again with the application. So I'm going to clear on this debug console, and let me just select EPO and then load weather. Right there, you go. You can see down there. So this is basically the data that we print out. And then this is basically the one that's being responded by the application. Okay, being responded by the application, and this is the data that we receive from our API. Okay, so if we mistakenly put like wrong API there, okay, I'll remove my API, try to retrieve the data, you can see there's no data there. Okay, because of my API is not working, and it will return wrong status code. Okay, if you want to see the status code, you can just print out the status code and what are the status code that's being written. Okay, let's see what is the status code that's being written. You can see that 401. Okay, 401. Okay, so you can check, you can use HTTP status code. 404 not found, document not found. 100 continue, 200 success, 201 created. So there's a bunch of status code. 400 bad request, 401 unauthorized. So which means that our request is an unauthorized access. 401. Okay, written 401 down there. Clearly, status code from server. The server still respond, but written 401. The rest, 404, not found, 405, not allowed, and so on and so forth. 500, internal server error, which means that you have server error, server issues. So you can get gateway issues, your network issues, and some other HTTP status that you can work your application with. Okay, so get back to my API there. And let's call another one. Let's call Medan. Question Medan is, yeah, Medan is available there. Okay. All right. Okay, next we want to deal with the data itself. How do we process the data? Okay, so process the data. We receive the data. We have the data already here. Okay, the data is there. We know that this is where we want the data that we want to be able to use. Okay, so I'm going to delete this print, so maybe else also on it yet. Okay, so if status code equal to 100 means that I have the data, I want to process the data. So I want to process the data. The first thing that I need to do is I have to parse the data. Okay, I have to parse the data, get the data into usable array. Okay, array. So you can see here var JSON data response dot body. So assign the response dot body to this JSON data. So let me just put it there quickly. Okay, assign that first to JSON data. So let me try to print out what are the things that being put it there. Okay, so I'm going to print first and see what's the thing that we get from this JSON data. Right, so I'm going to clear my console, press this. There you go. So which means that now JSON data hold the data itself. We have the data, but the data still in JSON data format. Okay, JSON data format. This is a fully JSON data format, right? I put it here. Get data from response and parse or assign to a variable or to a variable, right? So that's basically the description there. So once you have that, okay, so I'm going to remove this one more time. This is just a string. Okay, you can see that's a string. So if you just assign this as a string, should be no problem. Just a string data. Okay, this is JSON data, string data. But you cannot access the data. You cannot read the data or be able to retrieve the data itself. So to be able to retrieve the data, here, there's another section here. We want to parse or we want to decode the data into array. Okay, to decode the data into array. So the second part of this process here is to decode the data. So we have our JSON data as a string. We need to use what we call as a JSON object decoder. All right, so this is JSON object decoder. So where do we get the JSON data decoder? Is basically from that convert. So you can see here, if I remove that, okay, if I remove that, you can get error. You will receive error because if we haven't yet import JSON. So to import JSON decoder, so we need to click on this import library.convert, which is an internal library to Flutter. All right, should be no problem now. So what we have here, we take the data that we receive from body, put it there, and then use JSON decoder to decode the JSON data, and then assign or put it into parse JSON. So this is what we call as a dynamic data type. Okay, dynamic data type. So when we talk about dynamic data type, means that it will be depend on what the data is being returned here. Okay, what the data that is being returned by this JSON. So the data that is being encoded is as follows. Okay, when we decode the data, we will decode data into a usable data format. Okay, so let me print out the value. So let me print out the value. I'm going to print out both value up here. I'm going to print out JSON data, and then I'm also going to print out parse data, JSON data. Okay, once we parse the data, what do we get? All right, so there are two print going to be print out. Let's see what are the data. So I'm going to select one location, I'll start, load weather. I'm going to increase this a little bit. So the section here, this two section here, 1, 2. So this section here, you can see that the data is in double comma there, bracket there, and the data, latitude, longitude, everything is there, but everything is in double or in string data. But when we parse the data, now you can start to see the data in this format now. Okay, they remove all the comma, all the semi-comma up there, and then put it into what we call as a usable data format, a dynamic data format, or in array data format that can be easily accessed by our application. Okay, so different. There's a difference. It's not the same. look like the same, but it is not the same. The data has been parsed, the data has been put into another object array that we can use. We cannot retrieve data from here. We can retrieve data from this parse JSON dynamic data. Okay, so that's basically the difference between JSON data and the parse JSON data. So to retrieve the data is quite easy now. To get the temperature data, okay, to get the temperature data, like this one, and the humidity data. So there are three data that I want to get here. Okay, so the first one, just want to get this data first. Okay, just temperature data. Okay, so temperature, we don't have that. We haven't yet defined our temperature. So the temperature, we need to define into our variable up there. Okay, the variable that I haven't yet defined, supposed to be defined, but I didn't. I think I've already defined it up here. Where is it? Oh, I didn't define the variable. So that's the issue with that. So you need to make sure that you need to define your variable. So you can just use string temperature. Okay, because it's just you can also define as say string temperature is by default. I'm not sure the data type. Let me see the data type first. I'm not quite sure the data type for that. So we have temperature. Okay, so now we have a temperature. So the temperature string data type should be okay for this. So to retrieve the data, you can see there's an object parse JSON. Okay, object parse JSON, and this is array main. This is multi-dimensional array, which is main and temp. So main and temp is basically we want to get from main. Main is, you can see here where's the main. There, this is main. Okay, this is main data. So inside main data, we have temp data. Okay, main sub array for the main is temperature. Okay, there you go. Main temp. This is main. Just hide on this, much easier to look. Okay, so you can see there's a main data there, and then there's a sub array temperature. Okay, so we just get temperature there. So if you want to print out the value, print temperature. Okay, this one is Celsius. Just Celsius. Okay, so just you need to interpolation. You can use interpolation, no problem. All right, save. All right, let's see if we manage to get the data, the temperature data. So for Changlun, load weather. Sorry. Oh yeah, data type. This is the double data type because we haven't yet parsed the data. So if this is the case, the data type, so we can just either we can convert the value up here as a double data. Where's my string temperature? I forgot about that also. Okay, here. This is double. So which means that we need to convert this into double. 0.0. It's double there. Okay. So rerun again, should be no problem. Okay. Just want to print out the value. All right. So again, load weather. Now you should be able to see this temperature. So weather for, let's say, Jitra. So this is temperature for Jitra. For, let's say, Medan. This temperature for Medan, 26 degrees Celsius. For Ipoh, 28.31 degrees Celsius. It's quite hot in Ipoh now. Okay. So this basically allows us to retrieve the data from our parse JSON data. So now you can retrieve any data that you want from there. So here what I have in mind is that I want to retrieve other data such as humidity data. Humidity data is this. So this is also the same. You can check the data and also weather data. Okay, sometimes the data is string data, sometimes it's not string data. So humidity data, I believe in integer because it's 100%, 30%. So you can confirm again, you can look at the data, but I believe humidity is a percentage. So for percentage, we can use integer. I believe humidity equal, let's start with 0% humidity. And also weather is a string. Okay, string weather equal double yet. And then at the bottom down here again, you can see weather parse data. Okay, this one a little bit longer because of the, just one more time, print out our parse JSON data. Okay, let me just load the weather again. Bottom down here. All right, so for humidity should be okay because the data is available under main. Okay, you can see there's under main there. You got temperature, you got max temperature, pressure, and humidity. Okay, you got 84%. 84%. Yeah, this is integer value. Okay, integer value. But for this is double value, this is double value, this is integer value, double value, double value. But for weather, so for weather information, we need to go to the array, weather array here. So the weather array consists of sub array. That. So we got weather. There's an array for weather. Okay. So the weather, we get the weather information from sub here, main. Okay, there's a sub array here. So weather 0 array, which is here. This is 0. And then we get from main. Okay, we get from main. And the main basically will describe this string. Okay, this string here, cloud. Okay, weather is cloud. If you want to get description, you can go for description. Okay, you can put a description there and then assign to a variable. So you got weather array. Yeah, from here, weather array 0. This is an array. If anything in bracket, this one is an array. So which is this is an array 0. So inside array 0, there's a sub array called main, which is this one. Okay, so the sub array for main will contain cloud. But if you want to get description, then you can just change the description. You will be able to retrieve description, which is this one. Few clouds. Okay. So basically assigned to 3 variable that we have here. Okay, so if you print out the value, everything, you should be able to get the value easily. All right, so next, this is one just to do the concatenation and everything, parse everything into description variable. So the description variable basically allow us to have a complete descriptions of our weather. Okay, so you can see that the current weather in the select location is weather. The current temperature is temperature. Celsius, and humidity is humidity percent. Okay, so this is basically assigned to a description string, and then now we can use, because our text at the bottom down here basically describe about the weather, but we are missing out our set state. So that's basically the last requirement that we need. Just put a set state there, and then it will update the user interface whenever we have pressed the button. Okay, so let's see if we manage to do that. So I'm selecting Ipoh, load weather. Now you can see there, the current weather in Ipoh is cloud, the current temperature is this, and humidity is 84%. Okay, so those are the simple method. Okay, the current method in Medan is haze. It's quite hazy there. Or maybe we can add some more, like I'm not quite sure, Bandung is quite cold, or Cameron also, you can use that also information. So you can just add the location. Let's say I want to add more location to this. Bandung is quite cold city. Bandung. I'm not sure Cameron Highland correctly spell as a that oh yeah. Bandung and also one Cameron Island. If That's so. All right, so you don't have that because you need to restart. Because the value is not there. You can put it into init state to assign the value, but yeah, should be no problem. All right, so now you can see that Bandung, right? So the current weather in Bandung is cloud. The current temperature is it's quite hot, 25 degrees Celsius, not that very cold. But in Cameron Highland, Cameron is not there. Reason being is that maybe the name here, Cameron Highland. I'm not quite sure how do you get the correct value. Is it Cameron is going to, is it just Cameron? It's Cameron. It's Cameron. I think it's a different location. Yeah, I think it's Cameron. Just check where's the location. You can just always check the real location because Cameron might be there's another location named Cameron. So we can just enable back the print so that we know the location that we receive. So this is Cameron is in the US. No wonder. Okay. So I'm not quite sure Cameron Highland spelled correctly in Malaysia for Malaysian, whether the Cameron or the Highland or CH correct location for that. But yeah, that's basically give you the idea. Okay. Because here we can see that this is not in Malaysia. This is in United States. There's a place called Cameron. And the weather there is 19 degrees Celsius with the humidity is quite high, 70%, around 70%. But in Bandung, 25, but the rest of Malaysia can be a bit hot. Star, so at 27 degrees Celsius already and rising, still in the morning, but it's rising there. Okay, so that's basically how we implement HTTP requests and allow for the application to display back the data that we retrieve from the request. But there's an it's not an issue actually. There's a problem because when we call the get weather, this is an asynchronous method. So as an asynchronous method, usually you don't want to get your, or you want to let user know that you are loading the data. Okay, that you're loading the data. For that, you can use our dialog. Okay, hold on. We can use our dialog window. So the dialog window actually, like for example, like this one, actually we're doing or we are calling the API, but this is very fast, so it means that you don't see you don't seems much. You can use a progress bar, or you can use whatever that you want to indicate that the operation work is running at the moment. You can use alert dialog. Okay, you can use alert dialog like the one that I use here. Let me just use show dialog. So I can just use show dialog up there. This one I'm using icon, but actually you don't have to. We can just use text again. Let's say loading dot 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 API call. Please wait. Okay, something like that, and then you can just dismiss the dialog. So just show dialog. Show dialog. Once done, you can just dismiss dial dot dismiss the show dialog. Because I don't want to use a library, I can just use the one that I normally use. That I use a lot is, hold on. I just put everything into show dialog. And then once it is done, hold on, let me check first. This one show dialog. One yes or no, login in, alert dialog, show dialog. Where's my show dialog? Forgot about that. Because here it will only show you the show dialog, but I want show dialog to be dismissible. So should be down here, is it? Show dialog dot. It's not available here because this one will only happen is I forgot about there's something like this. So loading, but you need to click outside. Forgot about the dismiss. It's supposed to be dismiss. Flutter show dialog dismiss. Forgot about that also. How do we dismiss automatically? Navigator.pop. Yeah, sorry, this one. Navigator.pop. Supposed to have this navigator.pop. This navigator.pop. Is it just that? Or there's past contact? It is asynchronous, but might be a problem with the just want to pop out the dialog once it is completed. Yeah, it's working, but not the best way to put it there. Because in asynchronous, usually you don't do much on this part. Yeah, but it does work. As you can see, loading for Bandung. You can see the please wait and then dismiss. Right, I'm doing for Ipoh, please wait, and then you get the information there. It's something like that, all right? Something like that. So that's basically just to indicate that the application or the operation is doing something at the back. So you usually have to wait. Okay. All right. So that's basically a very simple weather application that allow you to have um, this or be able to call API and then retrieve the API information, the data in JSON data format, and then you parse the data into usable data that you can use within your application. So it's very simple implementation and allow you to use this easily for any other type of your application. All right, that's for these HTTP requests.